Man, as Aristotle once said, is by nature a social animal. We are wired to connect, to belong, to find purpose beyond ourselves. But in a fragmented, lonely world, that natural drive can turn toxic. When people feel powerless, isolated, or directionless, they don't always turn to community. They turn to cults, to dangerous evil groups. They don't always seek truth. They seek certainty, identity, and a cause to lose themselves in. In this video, I will discuss why people join extreme groups through the lens of Eric Hoffer's masterpiece, The True Believer. We'll explore the psychology of the fanatic, what turns ordinary people into ideological warriors, and why, for many, the comfort of belonging outweighs the cost of reason. Stay with me, because understanding the mind of the true believer isn't just about history or politics. It's about protecting ourselves and our society from the next mass movement that needs a devil. People rarely become fanatics in a vacuum. Radicalization is usually triggered by a combination of personal despair and social collapse. Hoffer argued that what draws people into mass movements isn't always ideology. It's frustration, hopelessness, and a hunger for belonging. In times of chaos, mass movements offer something seductive. They promise to erase the present world with all its confusion and replace it with a future that feels certain. As Hoffer saw it, the true believer must be deeply disillusioned with the present and profoundly hopeful about a future promised by the movement, no matter how extreme it is. Social scientists today support this view. Studies show that feelings of isolation, exclusion, and marginalization are powerful predictors of radical behavior. Whether it's a pandemic, economic downturn, or political instability, people who feel left behind become vulnerable to any group that offers them a voice, an identity, and a cause to fight for. When people suffer financially or feel they've been denied the future they were promised, anger builds. Broken families, loneliness, and lack of community create a psychological vacuum. Many who join radical groups aren't monsters. They're searching for connection. As one study notes, even the most antisocial individuals still long for a sense of belonging. When people feel ignored or powerless, especially under oppressive regimes or polarizing political systems, extremism starts to look like the only way to create change. This can be seen in the French Revolution, which began with cries of liberty and justice, fueled by famine, inequality, and political paralysis. But it soon spiraled into the Reign of Terror, where mobs and radical factions like the Jacobins executed thousands, including fellow revolutionaries. In Hoffer's terms, the revolutionaries became the very demon they denounced. Their despair over the present and desperate hope for a purified future drove them to extremes at points when some of them are ready to sacrifice their lives for their parties as well. How? They have to go through a process which I am going to discuss now. There is a psychological transformation, a gradual process in which confusion and despair are replaced by total devotion to a cause. It often begins when an individual stumbles upon a leader or ideology that seems to unlock their pain, offering simple answers, a shared enemy, and a clear mission. These movements don't win followers by logic or debate. They begin by fulfilling emotional needs, the need to belong, to feel seen, and to matter. The person is welcomed, absorbed, and slowly remade. This process is known as de-individuation, the loss of personal identity in favor of group identity. Cult leaders and extremist figures deliberately encourage this through intense group bonding, isolation from outside voices, and constant reinforcement of the movement's narrative. Doubts are framed as betrayal. Complexity is replaced with absolutes. Members stop seeing themselves as individuals. They become, in Hoffer's words, interchangeable cogs in a machine. One common technique is what might be called make-believe obedience. Recruits are trained to believe that an invisible authority is always watching. Just like the character O'Brien in Orwell's 1984, leaders construct a reality where even imaginary figures, Big Brother, hold power. Fear, shame, and blind obedience become second nature. Outside the movement, the person is once again a lonely, powerless nobody. Inside it, they are a soldier of purpose. Over time, this emotional manipulation gives birth to a new identity, one willing to sacrifice money, family, even life itself. The world becomes binary, us versus them, truth versus lies, believers versus traitors. No argument or evidence from outsiders can penetrate this mindset. The believer is locked into a moral crusade. History is full of such transformations. In 1930s Germany, the collapse of the economy and national humiliation after WWI pushed ordinary people, jobless workers, disillusioned youth, even scholars, into the arms of Hitler's Nazi Party. Remarkably, around half of the original Nazi stormtroopers had previously been communists. As Hoffer said, "When people are ripe for a mass movement, they are usually ripe for any movement." Modern parallels are no less disturbing. In war-torn regions, abandoned youths are radicalized into suicide bombers. In seemingly stable democracies, people isolated by political polarization or economic despair find themselves swept into cult-like political movements. Psychological studies like the Milgram obedience experiments and Zimbardo's prison study show how easily ordinary people can commit extraordinary acts under pressure, hierarchy, and groupthink. But what makes this so alluring? This is worth explaining as well. Extremist groups often fulfill these needs by offering a clear, simplified worldview. You're either with us or against us. Complex realities are replaced with rigid black and white thinking. As sociologist Pete Simi notes, many recruits have a low tolerance for ambiguity and prefer clean, unquestionable answers to life's messiness. This mental rigidity also fuels scapegoating. Fanatics are trained to direct blame outward, toward an enemy, a corrupt government, an ethnic group, or an opposing ideology. This keeps them from looking inward and confronting their own fears or failures. When others around them share that hatred, it creates a sense of family, one many of them never had. The shared enemy becomes a bonding tool. As Eric Hoffer and philosophers like Voltaire observed, fanaticism is like a fever. It distorts judgment and makes people feel powerful. The fanatic no longer sees themselves as a victim, but as a hero with a mission. This narrative of sacrifice for the greater good is one of the most seductive parts of radical ideology. Hoffer warned that once self-sacrifice is glorified, even violence can feel noble. Charismatic leaders exploit this vulnerability. They give their followers not just orders, but emotional refuge. Through propaganda and repetition, the leader becomes the protector of the movement and the embodiment of its truth. Followers stop thinking critically, not out of stupidity, but out of emotional dependency. As Hoffer put it, people follow not because of a doctrine, but because the movement offers an escape from the anxieties of an individual existence. Another key factor is identity simplification. In times of confusion, people crave clarity. Extremist ideologies reduce identity to a single label: religion, race, ideology, and sort the world into allies and enemies. This shortcut is psychologically comforting, especially for people who feel overwhelmed by the complexity of modern life. Importantly, this allure cuts across all social classes and intelligence levels. There is no single extremist personality. Doctors, students, workers, and the unemployed can all be drawn in, as long as the ideology speaks to their emotional wounds. Recruiters know this. They tailor the message. Some are swayed by intellectual arguments, others by slogans or tribal loyalty. But fanatics remain fragile. Their devotion depends on constant validation. The moment self-doubt creeps in, whether in the follower or the leader, it threatens the entire illusion. Cult leaders know this. which is why they demand absolute loyalty and suppress dissent. Any crack in belief can lead to a collapse into nihilism, a terrifying return to the very emptiness they were running from. There is another question that arose when I was writing the script for this video, a very important one which I am going to discuss now. Fanatics certainly think so. They see themselves as heroes standing against evil, warriors of justice, or martyrs for a higher truth. Throughout history, revolutions have been led by those who believed brutality was necessary for liberation. But when we examine these actions through a moral and philosophical lens, the story becomes far more complex and dangerous. As Eric Hoffer warned, extremism comes at a terrible cost. Hatred might temporarily unify a group, but over time it corrodes the very values it claims to defend. Though hatred is a convenient instrument for mobilizing a community for defense, in the long run, it does not come cheap, Hoffer wrote. Time and again, history shows how revolutionaries become the very tyrants they once fought against. The Jacobins, the Bolsheviks, and even modern radical movements all echo this tragic cycle. Yet some thinkers, like Byung-Chul Han, suggest that the desire to join groups, even radical ones, stems from a deeper existential hunger. In a world increasingly marked by loneliness, hyper-individualism, and digital alienation, people turn to rituals, gatherings, or ideological tribes just to feel human again. Han believed that shared social practices help us maintain our emotional balance, and without them, loneliness becomes unbearable, even dangerous. For some, joining a group, even a harmful one, feels like survival. This is where the question becomes morally gray. People don't always join extremist groups because they're evil. Some are searching for meaning, community, or simply a reason to keep going. Those suffering existential crises, particularly intelligent, introspective individuals, often face a crossroads. Some turn to religion, others to political ideology. Some spiral into despair or even suicidal thoughts, as Leo Tolstoy once did. For them, radical belief can feel like a lifeline, but this is exactly where Friedrich Nietzsche would draw the line. Nietzsche fiercely criticized the herd mentality, the instinct to lose oneself in collective identity just to avoid facing life's emptiness. He believed that true strength lies in enduring loneliness, in forging meaning without needing the comfort of mass belief. For Nietzsche, joining a group to escape nihilism is not overcoming it. It's surrendering to it. Voltaire offered a similar warning. Fanaticism is delirium, not vision. It transforms dreams into violent obsessions. When a dream justifies murder, it stops being noble and becomes monstrous. No modern moral philosopher would argue that the deliberate killing of innocents or the oppression of dissent can be justified, even in the name of freedom or justice. In the end, the allure of fanaticism may be rooted in deep human pain, but its justification collapses under the weight of history, ethics, and reason. And when that pain is amplified through collective identity and righteous certainty, it no longer seeks healing. It spreads like wildfire through history's darkest chapters. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, madness is something rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, peoples, and ages, it is the rule.